Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And boy, oh boy, we've got a great one for you today. Maybe there's things in your life that really trigger you, that kind of set you off and take all the goals or your gains that you're making on your health or wellness program and set you right back to zero. It could be a family member, could be an emotional event, could be who knows what. But the bottom line is today we're going to talk about what it means to be trigger proof and what is stopping most people from healing. And a lot of biohackers have no idea that this is really the secret key to unlocking a new level of health, vitality, and peace of mind. And our guest today is Dr. Nima Rahmany. He is a chiropractor and an educator specializing in helping individuals and professionals get to the root cause of their physical and emotional challenges, from stressed, depressed, and anxious to living powerfully aligned on purpose. So after he built a successful chiropractic practice in Maple Ridge, BC, my home province, he started all in 2016 to pursue his passion for teaching and coaching professionals who are stressed, depressed, anxious to transform, and have their best years ever in both private and corporate world. Now, here's one of the interesting things. A lot of people don't know that many of these super high achievers are actually some of the most anxious, stressed out people in the world, and they're trying to kind of chase after this. Dr. Nima, welcome to the show. I can't wait to dive into this. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Wade. I love your energy.
Well, let's just get right into it. First off, a little bit about, before we get into the trigger stuff and why that's so important, but let's give it in your own words. How did you fall into this position, or was it a direction? Like, give us your backstory, where you grew up, all that sort of thing.
As a chiropractor, well, my training is in chiropractic, and I always prided myself in getting to the root cause. You know, born in Iran, moved to Canada when I was 4. Had challenges growing up in a small town and being dark-skinned and having challenges with racism and being bullied and all of that. So self-esteem was an issue for me. And so I always kind of studied things that could help me with that. But I found chiropractic at the age of 13, and I knew that was the direction I wanted to go.
Wow, really early.
At the age of 13.
What triggered that? What set that up?
Well, I went and had an adjustment with a chiropractor, and he came to our school, and he just talked about the chiropractic philosophy. He had the spine up, and he talked about how the brain and nervous system are the master control system of the body, and every irritation along the path is going to affect your health and your well-being. And I was like, sold. I love that idea. I went in and I got my first chiropractic adjustment at 13, got up off the table. I said, this is the ticket to health. Right here.
Wow. Yeah. What a deeply impactful event.
Yeah, at the age of 13. And so I went towards that, while at the same time on the periphery, dealing with my self-esteem issues, reading up on stuff like Tony Robbins. What can I do to feel better about myself from getting bullied, and growing up with the shame of being Iranian born in a community, in a part of the world that doesn't look great at Iranian radicals. And I would watch television and see my country being portrayed in such a harsh, terrible way that I was raised with this unconscious shame for being who I am.
Right.
So this low self-confidence, low self-esteem, paired with my love for chiropractic, I just kept studying. And one day, always dreamed of being able to merge the two in terms of health and well-being. And after a few years of being a chiropractor and being an entrepreneur, I guess, I was just dealing with a whole lot of unresolved shame, bullying, like the low self-esteem and self-doubt was crippling me with anxiety. And so I just kept developing kind of skills and tools to deal with that. And then one day, a woman named Gwen walks into the office. She could hardly move. Gwen had like a hot disc herniation, shooting down, pain down the back of her leg, sciatica. I did a an x-ray of her spine. She was carried in by her husband. She was dealing with pain for, about 20 years, uh, painkillers, wasn't going to a chiropractor. And she also had a long list of depression, anxiety, a history of suffering, story of suffering. So one day when she came in, I adjusted her. She got up off the table, and she could then move for the first time without a cane, because she was kind of carried in by her husband. I do her first adjustment. She gets up off the table and is like, "Oh my God, this is a miracle." And she was crying. Her husband saw her move. He was crying. I'm a bit of a wuss, so I start crying as well. And over the next few months, I got to see her light up, and it was incredible to see this transformation in her.
Wow.
And one day she no-shows for an appointment, and we call her, and they're like, "Hey, Gwen, where are you?" Her husband answered the phone and said, "Unfortunately, Gwen died of a heart attack today." And
Oh
at
my
that
God.
moment, I was like, oh, she had a story of suffering. I've done a lot of personal development work. I've learned some tools. I didn't talk to her about it because I thought that there was only a few minutes that I have. I can't really go into the depths of really healing your past. And so I decided after that I was going to become a real doctor, which is teacher. Doctor means teacher. So I started creating
Correct.
these workshops in my office called Life Skills for a Stressful World. And unknowingly, I was putting together a methodology to heal past trauma and attachment wounds with primary caregivers, because that was going upstream, going after the root cause. My learnings helped keep going upstream at the root cause. And so to make a long story short, that was 12 years ago. I sold my practice since then, and now teach exclusively an online community of self-healers how to heal their attachment wounds and to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma that is contributing to their health issue.
Beautifully said. And an area that we're just now starting to confirm through epigenetical research and stuff about trauma from generations being carried down and expressed in patterns of psychology or patterns of anxiety or patterns of self-esteem or a variety of different conditions. And, if I go back to in growing up in a small town Canada, there used to be something like my mother or my grandmother would say is like, "Oh, it runs in our family," or "that runs in their family." That was their description of this. That runs in their family.
The
So
justification.
yes, so let's peel back a couple layers of the onions here,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's a lot of people who are maybe doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. They're saying, "Yeah, I'm following the diets, I'm doing the training, I'm doing whatever it happens to be, but I'm still going back into this cycle." Do you feel there's a blocked trauma in the system that's holding them up, or what's going on there?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Everything that we go through, we are our bodies, our minds, our way of being is an artifact from the past. And so whenever you feel blocked, um, what we do is, we feel like we're sabotaging ourselves. We feel like, um, we just can't move past this resistance, right? There's the resistance is too great for me to move past it. What that is unresolved trauma. And by resolved, meaning faced, felt, integrated, move through the body. I'm not talking about going and talk therapy your way out of, thinking your way out of feeling issues, is by going and taking those younger parts of us that that we abandoned the second we were in trauma. Like we experienced feelings, and no, we didn't have caregivers that taught us how to feel, how to move through those emotions. We were taught, don't cry. We were taught to suppress those emotions. So when emotions come up, we then stuff them down, we react to them, we judge ourselves, we abandon ourselves, we blame and shame ourselves, and then we resist our resistance, and then we can't move. And it takes a courageous person to go back and rescue those younger parts of us that didn't feel safe to love, didn't feel safe to express themselves, didn't feel safe to actually have feelings, didn't have their reality validated, experienced, breakdowns in your parents' relationship. How did you do conflict? Ask yourself this question: how was conflict modeled in your upbringing? Did you see your parents just lose it on each other? What did, your nervous system is getting imprints on what love and attachment is by the way by observing how your parents are attached to one another and how your parents attach to you. And without really understanding that, our nervous systems get those imprints and then become triggered in day-to-day life. So when you want to, go and get that new job, or you want to start a business, all of a sudden your mind says, I want to start a business, but then that unresolved trauma of that little Nima or little Wade says, no, I'm not good enough. And then it literally blocks you physiologically. So without learning how to become trigger proof to that, then the old complexes run you. You don't have control.
This is a really good point, because I've noticed in my own career and dealing with thousands and thousands of people, I'd see these repeating cycles, and sometimes people would have gone to therapy for psychologists and things for 20, 25 years, and they know all the nuances and they knew all the drug chemistry, but they're still living in the same situation. They still have anxiety, they still have depression, they still whatever, and they go, oh, you're bipolar, or you have a chemical dependency or whatever. But it seems to be this kind of cyclic thing. How would you categorize maybe how you approach those things as opposed to, say, those models?
Yeah, often people who've done the therapies for all those years and done all of the personal development intellectually know what the issue is, right? And they'll be able to talk it through. They'll be able to explain it, justify it, say, oh, it's because of this about my mother and da 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 da, and my mother was this and my father was that. And they know exactly here what it is, but the body is where the implicit memory is. And so you can intellectualize your way out of it, but the moment you get triggered, this stops working, this goes offline. And what comes online is the actual old wounds from those stories you keep trying to rationalize and talk about, and they take over. So what happens is we're trying to think our way out of feeling problems. And therapy is a great, you do need to talk to somebody, but oftentimes it's just telling the story at a cognitive level to avoid the actual painful feelings associated with it.
Would you say that that's quite common today in the westernized digital world, that we have a great intellectual kind of idea about things? We know, like, from a mental side, like you said, we've got it all things, but we're still stuck in the actual process. So knowing is not integrated. It's
Totally.
not. And so tell me, how did you figure this out? This is really cool. And then what did you do when you found that? I'd love to know that journey.
Well, I was the king of intellectualizing. I would talk about and teach about healing and all of that stuff, but I was still living in a toxic, codependent relationship, living one way, talking one way, teaching one way, but living a different one, right? And so your question regarding talking our way, intellectualizing, I discovered that talking and therapies and the personal development work was usually a pacifier to avoid feeling pain.
Right. So that's the big thing. And even when you say that, you can almost feel the tone switch from here and go right here and go, oh, right?
Exactly. That is the key to healing. And you feel it, right? I can now, based on the work that I've done, I can feel when a speaker or a leader or somebody who's talking into a camera is actually in their heart or they're in their head. Once you've done the work, you can actually feel the difference, right? I was living a two-dimensional existence, and just like you had said, people will talk their way through. The best example is, if you've ever been in a relationship where you know this person's not good for you, you know,
Right.
like it just, like, it just doesn't add up. But your body is saying something totally different. You're not governed by this. You're governed by the physiology. There's an unresolved wound that's actually in charge. Another example is, you know what you should be eating. I'm sorry, you don't really need a PhD in nutrition to know what is ideal to put into the body. It's pretty basic.
Yep.
And you know that picking up a barbell and doing this will be helpful. You know here. But actually, physiologically carrying it through is a different story. That's the difference between talk therapy, and somatic therapy. Somatic work, which is embodiment. Embodiment starts with acknowledging the pain that your ego is trying to block you from feeling. So it's incredibly difficult. True healing is not available at a therapist's office. It takes a highly skilled practitioner to be able to help you identify your ego defenses and justifications and story that you love to tell, to avoid going in and feeling like a failure, feeling like a bad mother, feeling like a horrible person. And true healing comes from surrendering to the tears of the little boy or little girl inside of you, us, that just is terrified of being bad, of being rejected.
How many people do you or have you experienced that are what the world would say as the ultra high performer, high successful, the person? And I used to discover this, and I might be leading a little bit here in my coaching business when I was a personal trainer, that these people who were the who's who of the city, who had the as I used to call it, the golden handcuffs to everything that they were supposed to have. And I always found it ironic. Everybody's trying to get 5 minutes with this person, and these people are paying to hang out with me in the gym, and they're unloading all these things that no one would ever imagine. How common is that amongst successful people and quote unquote successful people in today's world?
The best indicator, okay, here's the thing. I believe it's to answer your question, Wade, I believe that's the true pandemic. The true pandemic is ultra successful people who have reached their success not from a place of true inspired, like, contribution, but it's to prove a part of them, an insight, to overcome the unconscious insignificance that's deep inside.
Deep,
Right?
very,
And
very
here's
much.
the indicator. Here's the indicator. Now that the work I've done and the people that I've helped, I work with really successful people. The greatest indicator for me is this. Guess what it is? Guess what I'm going to say. What's the greatest indicator for me if if of what someone's true success, if it's authentic?
No idea.
The quality of their relationships.
That's a good one.
A secure, if you make $5 million a year in your business, congratulations. Like, that's a huge accomplishment. It's rare. You're among the elite. And I'm not going to use the word but, and be careful that you're not that type of person who's in their 40s and 50s and still hasn't managed to get relationships right. They're rich in business and poor in relationships. That's an indicator of unresolved trauma.
Can you expand on the quality of their relationships? Because I think it's kind of nebulous.
Okay.
I want people that might be listening to it. Is that their family relationships? Is that their friend relationships? Is that their business relationships? Is that their romantic relationships or relationships with their kids?
All of the above. There is a magic that happens when two people, like, for example, you and I, we just met not even an hour ago, right? Instantly, based on the energy between us, it's like you and I, this conversation is a container, Wade. You and I are in a container, which
Right.
I have paid attention to creating containers with people where they feel seen, they feel loved, they feel acknowledged, they feel that I'm present. There's love there. And that is the ultimate, right? It's the ultimate skill that when we have unresolved trauma, because what happens is the relationship, when I have unresolved trauma, there's that insignificant part of me that I haven't come to terms with yet. I'm going to use relationships to become transactional to fill what's missing there. And ultimately, they will never be rewarding or fulfilling. They will be codependent. They will be enmeshed. You don't have an ability to speak your truth. You end up devaluing other people and controlling people with money. I realized this a couple of years ago where I was like looking around and the only people close to me were the ones that I was paying. And
Right.
I was like, oh, I got to look at this. And that is the indicator is, do you have like, congrats are you that you're successful? Great. But do you have to pay people to be around you? Think about it. When you're not distracting yourself with your success and your money, and when you sit by yourself, how do you feel? Are you stir crazy? Can you actually sit by yourself? Do people constantly criticize that they don't feel that you're there emotionally? Do you constantly get the feedback like, I can't win with you, Wade? I'm not saying you.
Right, but these are
These are
questions to start. These are questions people need to
right.
ask themselves when they do a fearless moral inventory.
Good. I love that. I love that. Fearless. Let me write that down, bro.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Fearless. Is that a thing?
I got that from my business partner. Him and I are really deep. Matt, who co-founded the company,
I can feel that, man.
and there's we're in some ways we're very similar. In other ways, we're very
opposite.
different.
Yeah.
And over the 20 years that we've worked together and been friends, we've had just epic battles, and it's almost like we're brothers who are competing, but then we go, hey, and we go back and forth, and it continues to be. And one of the things that we do is, as I've coined this recently, and I've discovered this over the years of development, and not to interject here, but I've come to the conclusion that the quality of your life is directly proportional to the amount of uncomfortable conversations you want to have people in your sphere of influence. It's really, really clear to me. And almost always when you have those difficult conversations, they're never nearly as bad as you might think. In fact, most people are quite grateful to have them, and it creates a deeper bond.
When you do it right, the conflict becomes a portal to deeper intimacy. That's one of the lessons of my work. 100%. I'm glad that you said that.
Okay, keep going, because I went on a tangent.
Yeah, that's all good, man. That's all good. This fearless moral inventory is a necessary component. If you have the guts to do that, the question you want to ask yourself is, okay, so what are the qualities of your relationships? And I realized that as successful as I was in business, I could not solve the riddle of a healthy attachment at home. And here's another question you want to ask is, and this was a great example, is how well do you do conflict? So can you, like you and your business partner, you've been together 20 years. Well, of course, you've had to go toe to toe many times in that process. It's not a question of, are you going to have a rupture to the attachments? I want you to look at relationships as cables, fiber optic cables. If, let's say, all of a sudden, you and I have an appointment, Wade, Okay, this is what a relationship is. Now, after this conversation, you and I have attached some fiber optic cables between us. There's some great rapport. We see eye to eye on a lot of things. We are present with one another. This conversation is engaging. Immediately, when I think of Wade Lightheart, I'm going to be like, wow, that guy's a pretty dope guy, because I remember our attachment. This is a beginning of a relationship. So as our relationship progresses and there's a shared past between us, let's say we continue this friendship for another 5 years, and then down the road, you don't show up on time for a meeting. You say, I'll see you at 2, and then 2:30 goes by and you haven't messaged me and I'm still waiting. Well, guess what happens to that? There's a little bit of a rupture that happens to our attachment. And
Right.
this is relationship. And the problem is this is all of us. And ruptures, it's going to happen between us. The question is, how good are you at the skills of restoring when that happens? That's what the whole purpose is. That's what the magic is, the secret sauce is. And so when you learn how to restore, you become unstoppable, and you have the foundation to create really satisfying, nourishing relationships.
So you had this discovery yourself first.
Oh
And
yeah,
there's an
painful.
old saying, "Physician, heal thyself." I think is a great um, theme, I think, or something that we all need to do. And because we all need healing on some level, and sometimes you don't have enough what I call emotional capital to maybe deal with some of the deeper traumas. You got to kind of build you up to be able to handle the really big stuff that life is going to throw at you. And that might not happen until your middle age or whatever it happens to be, because you know, it's kind of like, if it took you out, if you had it before, it would have took you out. You get to a certain point and you're never really at this success mountain. You know, there's always another one in the distance, and of course to go there, there's a valley in between. So how did this come? Like you're in this situation, you're like, hey, the only people around me in my relationship are the people that I pay. There's something wrong here. What did you do at that moment? Because, you know, you're good at successful business, you're doing all the things right. Everybody's like, hey, well, this is a really great guy, this is the thing, blah blah blah. And you're giving all this wonderful advice and healing people and getting all this acknowledgement and everything. And then all of a sudden you're sitting there looking in the room and it seems kind of empty and barren.
The first thing that I did was I hired somebody that I trusted to really give it to me straight and uncomfortable.
Ooh, I love it.
Oh,
who is
fuck,
that
it was
person? Who is
painful.
that person?
His name is Dr. Russell Kennedy.
Uh-huh.
We became friends instantly. We met in a men's group, and it was like this instant friendship that happened because he saw something in me, and I definitely saw his wisdom. And he's got this amazing book out. I'm going to give him a big plug right now. It's called Anxiety RX.
Anxiety RX. We'll
RX
put
by
this in the
Dr.
show.
Russell Kennedy.
We're going to put this in the show notes for
Yeah.
people who want to check this out.
100%. He's love the man, and his book is amazing. He basically taught me that everything that I was doing in my life in personal development, I realized that I was doing it to avoid feeling pain, those painful feelings of insignificance and unworthiness. And he said, put down any of these kind of cognitive mastery tools, and just he held space for me to feel like for 6 months.
Wow.
And he taught me.
So he's unloading on you in this 6 months, or you're going through this discovery process?
Not
how's
unloading on me.
Yeah,
He's not like shaming me. He's not like humiliating me. But he's like, no, sit in your loneliness. You're exactly where you sit, feel it fully. Like he basically, we were friends and mentor, and he guided kind of me through this process, which I'm so grateful for because I get to do that with people too. I realized that I was always using personal growth to try to feel better. I was using success to try to feel better. I was using attention from women to try to feel better about myself, to validate, because I didn't feel that validation for myself. And I realized that my ticket to freedom was, instead of trying to feel better, I got to get better at feeling.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others is a total game changer. Suddenly you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Beautifully said. So would you say that that's quite common in, say, the serial entrepreneur,
It's epidemic.
the player, or
yeah.
or I always call it the the self-help junkie that keeps going to the next seminar and getting
Check all of the above, my friend. You name it, the player, the self-help. It's like, look, I have this paralyzing feeling of unworthiness inside of me, which comes from the stories that I had in my childhood traumas and the experiences that I had that are still in my body. And I can talk my way out. They're in my body. How do I know? Because they get activated when I get into relationship, and then I keep attracting the same type of person again and again. The same argument. I divorced, and then I started dating, and then I'd get into the same relationship patterns. And I'm like, wait a second. Okay, what's going on? Until I understood the impact of inherited family trauma, and that it didn't start with me. And I started a whole journey of healing with my younger self and getting into the body and feeling feelings that I didn't want to feel. And the reason why I used to say, yeah, you can journal and do kind of like holistic psychologists, do the work and heal. And you definitely should, like, journal and future self journal, breath work. I do breath work regularly, and I host breathwork events, global Zoom breathwork events every month. Highly recommend all of those things. But I couldn't see my blind spots. When I was kind of teetering into ego and narcissism, I would have that feedback and going, hey, Nima, just check in. I'm feeling ego right now. And then I'm like, oh, okay, good. It's like he always had a reflection, always had a mirror for me to make sure that I was coming actually from my heart rather than being run by my ego. And the ego is there to protect this wounded child inside of me. Right. And so by exposing all of those parts and seeing them and really like embodying it over time, I made that commitment. I said, all right, I don't care what distance I have to travel, whatever price I have to pay. I'm going to take a pause on working and trying to make money and be successful and be relevant. And guess what? I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to put my place up on Airbnb, and I'm moving back in with my parents at the age of 43.
No.
So that,
so Whoa, that I said, this is so deep.
Voluntarily.
Whoa.
And I'm going to expose myself. And by the way, I don't recommend you do this. Don't try this at home. But I moved back in with my Persian mother and father at the age of 43 after falling on my face again, divorce, and then this other relationship which they didn't approve of. So they could easily go, we told you so. But I went in to the frickin', like, it's like being a veteran in the Iraq war, having to leave because of post-traumatic stress disorder, coming back to the States, and then being sent back within while you haven't fully healed, being sent back to the site that caused the trauma in the first place. And then I learned how to become trigger proof. I learned how to stop expecting my mother and father to really see me and acknowledge me, and I worked on giving that to myself, and then I overflowed it and I was able to give it to them, healed my relationship with them, and within a year I met the woman we got married in April. Our child was born in September, so I have a 6-week-old. And not only am I the president, I'm also a client. So healing my attachment wounds is what I did. You must go back and heal those. And so what I was unknowingly doing was going in, getting triggered by my parents, coming back, feeling the feelings, putting together my own cocktail of methodology to resolve it. And I came up with the latest edition of the overview method, which helps heal attachment trauma. And I'm living proof of it. We have an amazing relationship. They love my wife. They're a part of their grandpa. They get to be, part of my son Dominic's life. And I basically solve the ultimate puzzle of my life that I couldn't solve. Nobody would have believed it to be true after my divorce 12 years ago. I just was on like a tear. There was no way I was going to commit again and go there. But I'm living proof. I've created a secure, attached relationship at home, and I help people now break the cycles of intergenerational trauma that didn't start with me or my parents.
Wow, that's just so much. I always share with I laughingly share with my friends. I'm like, well, you can really tell how well your self-improvement, self-development program's going. Just go hang out with your parents. And every year I go home at Christmas time to my family. And I've never missed a year in my entire life. So I'm getting close to 50 now, and I've done it every year. I haven't missed it. And the first 10 years was really hard, I would just
grit your teeth.
Your mom or your dad could say one thing and you're triggered.
The past
right, it comes up. Oh, why do you always say that? You're off on this.
You're 8 years old again.
And then as I noticed over the years, things would get less and less and less. And now I find that is one of the watch points. I'm certainly not clear on everything. I still have things that trigger me, but it's something I pay attention to. So can you share, maybe this is so exciting because not a lot of people really talk about this, but let's talk about maybe, let's say the mechanics of a trigger. What is the structure of a trigger? What's its purpose? Why do we have them? And why do we continue to be held hostage by them by either then avoiding those situations or rehashing them or recreating them in our regular lives? Like, what's going on there? Why do we do these things? What? And we all know this word. We all say, oh, I got triggered.
Yeah. Well, what happens is when you're younger, you've had experiences that you remember, whether it's schoolyard bullying or whether you were hit by your dad or whether you spilled the juice. Excuse me. You spilled the juice and all of a sudden dad turns to you and goes, Wade, why did you do that? And you're 3 years old. And in that moment, you're flooded with all of these neurochemicals you don't know what to do with. Your mind, you have your unconscious mind is your body. Your conscious mind is completely offline. You get a signal after that moment happens. It goes up into your brain, and your conscious mind needs to make meaning out of all of that. So guess what the meaning little Wade is going to make out of that when his dad yells at him like that is, I'm bad. There's something wrong with me.
Right.
Now, that is stuck in your body, that I'm bad. Now, when you go through life and all of a sudden you're in school and you get the wrong grade and somebody's voice raises, or the teacher will say something, or the principal, any authoritative, figure, a coach, you'll go and you'll play high school football. And then all of a sudden the coach will be like, Wade, what the hell? All of a sudden, what happens
Boom.
is,
There you go.
boom, you're no longer in that moment. You are now completely taken over, hijacked in your amygdala, in your implicit memory of your body, as though that 3-year-old is happening right now. When we get activated, your nervous system, something similar as an old wound gets activated, we don't feel as though that thing that happened when you were 3 was in the past. You feel like it's happening in the here and now. And what's happening is your body is bringing up its Navy SEALs, its defense mechanisms, its fight or flight, it's all of the ambassadors, the Marines, to try to protect you because you don't feel safe.
Right. And these are probably like just biological mechanisms for survival in a very, dangerous world that we had, evolutionary, which has
Right.
changed today to more of like
Well,
these little impacts that may not be a threat to us physically, but are just as damaging and anchoring.
and you don't have a choice, Wade. It just comes through you. It happens. Like it comes up and you don't have a choice about it. And you don't even know it's there until it gets activated. So a trigger is a nervous system activation of an old past event in which we can respond with a fight or flight. We want to flee, we want to run, or we want to fight. Or if the stimulus is beyond the capacity of the body, when you're younger and you're met with an obstacle or a resistance that's too powerful for you, what happens is you then leave your body. You then check out, you dissociate. You then go in. This is people with like sexual trauma or whatever that they just don't, in order to survive, it's kind of like it's a biological function where if you're being, in like the wild, if you're being eaten by a tiger, two things. If I just play dead, maybe the tiger will go away. That's one evolutionary benefit for the checking out and dissociation to save your life. Or if I check out and leave my body, I'm not going to feel pain when I'm getting eaten.
Correct.
So the trigger either goes into fight or flight where you're running or fighting, or it's too much where you go into a freeze-like state.
Yeah.
Deer in headlights, you leave, you can't leave, you feel hopeless, you don't want to get up out of bed. This is where the dorsal vagal activation, which we incorrectly assume that that's like depression. It's not, it's just a nervous system state of dysregulation that we've labeled as a disorder, but it's actually evolutionary. It's a wonderful tool your body uses in order to survive. Now, the problem is, in relationships, these will come up. You'll say something, you'll be with a partner, and her voice will raise, and she'll get angry because she's projected some of to you. Her voice raises, and then all of a sudden, Wade goes three becomes 3 again, is like, I'm a bad person.
Correct.
And now Wade is no longer in charge. He is now being driven by those unconscious traumas that didn't start with him, and it didn't even start with his dad. Here's the mind of this. If we go back and trace that event when Wade drops his juice and when dad gets triggered and says, why did you do that? And then we pause and we remove Wade out of that situation. And I sit Wade's dad down and I go, hey, Wade Senior, whatever your dad's name is.
Gary.
Hey, Gary, here's the deal. When Wade dropped the juice and you got so upset, what was the story you were making out about him dropping it? And if you really ask, because I've done this one before, Gary would say, oh, I reacted because he made the mistake and I feel like I'm a bad father.
Right.
And Gary, where did you get that?
From his dad.
From my dad. And now you're seeing the impact of how intergenerational trauma, how it affects you and how it affects the choices of relationships that you make, how it affects you trying to make $5 million a year to prove that he's not a bad person.
Correct.
And all of this is unconsciously driving the bus of your life. And you think you're this entrepreneur that has freedom and control, when in fact, there is none. You are governed by this thing. You are a slave to it. And becoming trigger proof is how you break the cycle.
Wow, that's just so great. This is so fun. And I know our listeners are loving this, and I'm there. Okay. You're back with Dr. Russell Kennedy sitting in your situation, which kind of uncorked this knowledge and wisdom. And you've probably described this better than anybody I think I've ever heard. And that which is beautifully done. So what happened in this moment for you, which obviously you were able to create this transformation, and then obviously
I got married. I got married. I had this epiphany and discovery, and I looked around in coronavirus time, and I said, "Holy crap! Everybody is reacting to this virus and looking for a hero outside of them, when this is the time to heal your intergenerational wounds." And I started to create, offers that had people that the 10%, because 90% just want to blame the other person and play the victim, but help the 10% say, all right, it didn't start with me, but it can end with me. I want to learn how to regulate my nervous system and become trigger proof. So now I teach people, especially the where it shows up the most is relationship limbo. People are in the brink of divorce. There has to be a wake up call that inspires you to look. Because I was riding the gravy train, making lots of money, and it wasn't until a big blowout, a shameful humiliation, a blowout in a relationship dynamic that was highly volatile, that woke me up and went, "Oh my God! Like, I've been, I've been, I've been operating in the world with a mask on, pretending to be somebody I'm not, to try to run away from an unworthiness that I didn't want to deal with." I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to heal with that. And once I feel confident enough that I'm now wanting to come and teach from the right place, not to just prove my dad wrong or to prove that I am like amazing and I am worthy, but actually from a place of, holy crap, like, if we don't learn this, our children then suffer from the unresolved grief, resentment, and guilt and shame that we haven't taken the time to integrate. So I work with people who want to stop the cycle and have healthy relationships, so that they're not rich in business and poor in relationships. They're actually like, great, you have an amazing family and circle of friends and team that love sharing your wealth with you. Not you have to pay them to be around you, but they just love your presence.
So let's talk about that, for example. Let's talk about these courses and that you're teaching in how to become trigger proof. I think this is really fascinating. And you do these in person, or you do them online as well? Like, so can you kind of unpack this for our listeners?
Before COVID, I had a three day like retreat, where we went in using breath work and cognitive tools, body-based tools to heal attachment traumas and learn communication strategies to have, healthier relationships. And that kind of carries into kind of like like an online training programs, where we guide you through clearing all of those resentments, right? And we teach you how to regulate your nervous system, heal your past resentments and regrets, dissolve the shame, that little voice in your head that says I'm not good enough, that inner critic. You learn how to dance with it. I call it dancing with your dark passenger, rather than trying to pretend it's not there. It's just like, look, this is right here. He's next to me. I'm not going to try to pretend like he's not there. I'm just going to learn how to integrate and work with him, and then learn how to, communicate with empathy towards yourself. And then you have a community of people who are engaged in that high level conversation. This is what, I basically take people through the entire process I had to go through to go from completely disconnected and insecure in relationships, needy of the attention, transactional, narcissistic, codependent, to being able to have relationships where, with men, friendships, family, where people actually feel, like heard people feel like they are, celebrated in my presence, So just to be able to create an amazing, rich internal world that matches your external. That's really the journey.
You brought up one thing, and I think this is really important, and I think that's a key indicator for people. And I do a lot of neurofeedback training. I go twice a year for neurofeedback, and one of the interesting things to unlock neurological and emotional freedom is tracking resentments and doing forgiveness work around them. And I have heard, and I'd love to see what you found, that the average person has at least 500 resentments and micro traumas or associative traumas that they've built up over the course of lifetime. Just on average, some people may have more, some people. What's your experience around that? And is that an indicator in your work? And is there other things that might indicate that you have things, like you said, I think it's really important for people to identify. We're all kind of playing a little game with ourselves, in that maybe all our friends can see, or the people closest can see our biggest liability, but we can't seem to see it ourselves.
It's true.
What are the things that are indicative that there are traumas to be unlocked, or things that are going to trigger you, or things? What do you look for when we're trying to find it, or someone that might be listening to say, can we do this?
Good question. Well, you nailed it when you said that we all are holding on to resentments, right? And like 500 at a time. And I know that we all have that. It's part of our human experience. Resentment is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Mm-hmm.
So yet we all have them. So the overview method and the methodology I teach is how to take those resentments and integrate them, not deny them and avoid them and say, everything's good. This is spiritual bypassing. I don't have resentments. I'm fine. This person dumped me, but I'm okay. So-and-so died, but I'm really positive and being happy. That's avoidance and spiritual bypassing. There's that will create illness later on. Okay, that's
pretty common in the New Age movement.
100%,
right?
That's most personal development is cognitive and spiritual bypassing. Cognitive bypassing is when you are trying to think your way out of these feeling problems and justify and explain your stuff, rather than actually allowing yourself to sit back and really feel the darkness of what you're trying to avoid. So we have cognitive and spiritual bypassing. That's the thing. That's the first problem. Problem number two is that most people say you got to learn to forgive. Forgiveness comes from I discovered it comes from an incomplete awareness. It comes from a narcissistic view that you are, entitled, and that you're a victim. And I'd rather take it to the next level, which is the highest form of forgiveness. As the result of the work that I teach my clients, is the highest form of forgiveness is the authentic recognition that everything served you and that there is nothing to forgive.
Right. Wow.
When you really understand the mechanism, let me say it again, the highest form of forgiveness is the authentic recognition that everything served you and there is nothing to forgive. In other words, thank you for giving me that experience. And I'm not saying that that's easy. I'm saying that's how you become free. I can sit here and go, oh, I have forgiven my father. But then it's like, when you understand the mechanisms of intergenerational trauma and the unconsciousness of your father's behavior, and the fact that he had no access to really understanding based on the experiences that he went through, you realize, first of all, number one, there's really nothing to forgive when somebody is like,
they didn't do this for you. They didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And so really what's happening in a lot of forgiveness work, if I got what you're saying, is there's almost like a moral superiority,
right,
grandstanding, right?
And that is ego. And that blocks your healing.
Right.
And so people who go and do those letters and burn them, forgiveness letters, and I'm healing, I'm like, dude, you are holding back your healing. It's a step forward. It's definitely a step up from like deep resentment. Sure, step it up. But I'm saying don't stop there. That's because you're not free. If anything that you still feel like you need to forgive, you are not free of. My only question is your healing and liberation. And that's where you take it to the next level. That's where we go.
Right. And I think this is a place where a lot of people really miss the point of what Jesus said, which is really forgive them for they know not what they do. He's not feeling him. He's turning it over to God in that word. And I think a lot of people miss this, is that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
so I can't hold them accountable. I'm standing here getting nailed to the cross. I'm totally forgiveness of this because it's not their issue. It's not my issue. It's just a symbolic.
Jesus is basically in that, and I'm not Christian, but it's so like pertinent, because what Jesus is saying is, I see the innocence of their behavior.
Yes.
And that is true freedom.
Buddha said that ignorance is the only sin.
Right.
And everybody has it, and everybody's ignorant. Right.
Until you awaken and you're like, oh my gosh, I was totally ignorant. So I don't need to forgive myself. Why do I need to forgive myself? I was completely ignorant. I appreciate myself. I love that part of that ignorant part of me. I'm going to be the rescuer of that part. I'm not going to look outside of me anymore.
So generally, would you say, though, for a lot of people, just getting to that first level of forgiveness would be kind of like base camp, and then that deeper level
it's not the finish line, though.
Right. It's getting you out of maybe paralyzing and repetitive based behaviors,
which is really a step up.
Just step up, but it's not the whole way.
Right. And I'm even going to take it further. If we're talking somatic work,
yeah.
Before you even get to that point, you might be in absolute pit of despair, in a freeze response. You're so in despair because you're like paralyzed and you're not moving. Well, guess what? Anger and resentment, then in that case, I've worked with people who are in that space. What I do is I climb them up the ladder and I get them into anger and resentment towards them, because that's a level of energy up from despair.
Yeah.
But it's not the finish line. So you go from despair to anger and rage. You've now stepped up the healing, right? And then you go into forgiveness, okay? But then it's not the ending. Unconditional love and gratitude is the ultimate reward. So you go from despair to rage and resentment. That's the next step up. Like, I'm a victim, playing the victim. Then you go into forgiveness, which is I'm the manifester. And then you go up into kind of like the channeler, which is, oh, it didn't happen to me. It's happening through me. I'm integrating it. You're an integrator. And then you go to the ultimate, which is it was all part of God's plan.
Right.
Right.
And associative with that statement, that's just not a languaging that we've learned the terminology.
You actually feel it.
There's no physiological response in the body where you're faking it or anything like that. It's like, it's just there.
That spiritual bypassing is going from despair to, oh, it was all part of God's plan. What you're doing is you're cognitively and spiritually bypassing the necessary rage, the necessary shame, the necessary guilt, the necessary grief that the human organism requires to move through, because they've come up, but we've learned to suppress them. And it's important to have somebody to hold space for you while you really, in a healthy way, move through those emotions. And that's the ticket to healing.
Very powerful. One of my favorite authors and spiritual teachers was a fellow by the name of Dr. David Hawkins, who used the map of consciousness, and he would tie the various emotional states with worldview and God view and self view and the process. And one of the things he would say that, well, anger might come up for you and you're in a total rage, and he says, well, you're actually not raging enough. You really need to get down and really just beat it out of you. You sit there and scream and yell until you've run the energy, because he said you don't realize that you've got the anger stacked up. He called it a stack that would be associated maybe with that and might have deeper components. And of course, Carl Jung talked about facing the shadow is where the spiritual, what's really separates, quote unquote, the men from the boys, or the women from the girls, whatever you want to call it.
This is when I talk to somebody, I can feel if they are an integrated shadow being or they have not integrated their shadow. I can feel it with their with their way of being, right? I've prescribed to many of my clients to take kickboxing or boxing and just release the rage on the bag as part of unexpressed rage that they've been holding on to, and let the tears let the tears go while you're doing it. Let it move through you. We have so many stories and narratives around emotions that you must suppress them, that you must keep them tight-lipped, and this is why we have dysfunction and body. This is why digestive issues. This is it, because you don't allow them through.
There's a great scene in, I think it was one of the later Rockies, where Stallone wants to fight again as an older man, and his friend Paulie says to him, "Rock, look, what are you doing for it? What's going on with you?" Right, and he says, "There's still stuff inside." And it's a very poignant where there's an emotion. He's a kind of a rough and tough guy, the character, but he hasn't got that out. And he knows that the only way that he can get that out is if he goes into the ring and faces it. And in that's what I love about those movies, and I think why it captures so many people, is he's expressing in a physical combat what's really happening on the inside. And of course, we're witnessing it right now. As the time that they were recording this, is we're seeing Mike Tyson getting ready to fight Roy Jones. Now, Mike Tyson, of course, was the baddest man on the planet, was hypnotized, had an incredible run, totally was self-destructive. He gets on Joe Rogan's, 6-8 months ago, says, "I don't even want to work out. I don't want to exercise because I'm scared of activating that demon again." And then he ends up going for he was complaining he's fat. His wife says to him, "Well, why don't you go work out?" He says, "I went on the treadmill for 15 minutes. He goes, and the next thing you know, it was 2 hours a day. And he's now at 54 years old, deciding to get back in the ring against one of the greatest guys. It's so, and you see his whole personality is kind of going back to that guy that
he's integrating his shadow.
It's very interesting what we're seeing this play out in the world with a fascinating character. So,
what do you think? What do you think is going? I'm just going to interrupt you. What do you think is going on with David Goggins? This is the same thing. David Goggins.
Yes.
You know his story, right? Obviously.
Yes.
David Goggins is
considered the toughest man in the world who don't know.
What he's doing is he's taking all of the punishment that his father gave him, and he's now giving it to himself. He is expressing his rage against his father and all of the kids in school that called him the N-word, right? He's literally using it in his marathons. Like, just watch him. He's still fighting those demons. And my prediction is he's not going to live long. This is a biohack, is that this is unresolved trauma. It will get him success. It will get you success.
Like the lady who you helped recover ended up dying of a heart attack because now the emotions, the physicality wasn't getting expressed. So the body's like, I can't take this. I'm checking out. I'm going to have a heart attack. So
that's my prediction. This is my prediction is there's a difference. There's an energy differential when you see somebody who's working and coming from their heart. And there's one that's coming from like ego or something to prove. When you're going from ego, something to prove in your business or whatever, you will get far. Like it got me very far, level of success, but it will always be capped there and won't have its full potential because you'll burn out, you will exhaust yourself, you will have like a setback, you will have something that collapses it, usually in the form of a health issue. That's why I got into this work, because I'm a chiropractor and I was seeing this, right? And it's like, look, this conversation is the stone that entrepreneurs don't really unturn because they're too busy taking courses and making more money, not realizing that what's driving them is a deep unresolved wound that has made them successful, but at the cost of relationships and health. And so that is the true indicator. Okay, great. I'm glad you make $5 million a year. Great. But what's your health and your relationships like? How does it feel to sit into your body? Can you sit alone in your body and just be okay with yourself? That's the true indicator of somebody's development to me.
Beautifully said. So, avoidance, cognitive and spiritual bypassing. Forgiveness is an incomplete awareness, nothing to forgive, and there's everything, anger and resentment, unconditional, to moving up to unconditional. Any other pieces that you go in this overview method that you talk about?
Well, it's a journey from the head to the heart. What makes us successful is our intellect, and it's the one thing that blocks us from true intimacy. And so the real juice of life is not in the things, it's in intimacy. And when you get that right, you bring that with you to the workplace, you freaking explode, because now people feel you as an entrepreneur. People feel your vision. People feel that it's about something that they can get enrolled in, right? Before it was all about me and my success. Now it's like, look, if you don't do this work, you're going to pass this down to kids, your children, and I stand for healed family dynamics, because that's what's going to transform the health of an entire family. It runs in our family. Yeah, well, so does codependency and enmeshment. But we just want to deal with the thyroid issue instead of the fact that you have a vocal chakra, that you can't speak your truth around these same people in your family that you love so much. All of you have thyroid issues, and chances are it's because all of you have this really strict upbringing of thinking you're bad if you step out and speak your truth. So you have enmeshment and codependency issues, and then you get sick because you've suppressed it all this time, and then you say, it's genetic, runs in the family, because it's too painful to actually go after and deal with the real issue, which is the unresolved shame. So I want to go where people don't, to answer what isn't answered.
This has been so exceptional. I want to give you the floor to talk a little bit about what you're offering. I think this is extraordinary value and something that our listeners are going to really cherish and take part in. How can they get access to it? What's the courses that you teach? How do you do I want to know, we covered a lot of things on the surface, but that's all cognitive.
Right.
How do we
get people into their hearts?
Yes. How do we do that?
All right. That's a great question. I had this question. People kept answering, like, where do I begin? Where do I begin? So I had to answer that and make it in a way which makes it accessible. So I created a 3-hour workshop called Breathwork and Badassery, which basically where you begin is your relationship with your breath. Okay. I realized as an entrepreneur struggling with anxiety that I wasn't breathing in. I was holding my breath half the day, which explains my relationship with the universe. Receive is inhale, give is exhale. So to have a healthy breath, I must have the effort on the inhale, effortless on exhale, which is a really great relationship with life, right? Effort and effortless. It can't just be effortless, right? And it can't just be effort. You got to have a balance of both.
Beautiful.
Right? So the breath indicates it. So if I'm not breathing in, which is receiving, exhale, which is giving, check and see what's your relationship with giving and receiving. I noticed I wasn't taking deep breaths in, meaning I didn't feel worthy of receiving. That unconscious thing that's happening without you even knowing tells you so much about your relationship with life itself. My relationship with my breath equals my relationship with life. So if you want to transform anything, we begin the foundational training of actually teaching you how to breathe and stay consciously connected to it. So it's a 1-hour workshop, a 1-hour breath work session. Where as a community, now on Zoom, we used to do it live. Now I do it on Zoom because of coronavirus. And you give yourself permission to go into breath and allow, when you just go into that breath, that 1-to-1 ratio, and go deepen into that breath, all of a sudden, all of your emotions that you've been suppressing will start to bubble to the surface. And they will move through your body, and then you'll make up stories of, oh my God, I'm scared to cry. And that's now you're going to be able to see your ego. You get a felt sense, bird's eye view of your ego and everything that stopped you in that workshop. And I add in an inner child meditation before that. So basically, it's a nervous system regulation crash course, understanding your different phases. In order to change it, you got to become a nerd for the nervous system, and you have to become a nerd in understanding yourself. So we start with breathwork and badassery, which is nervous system regulation training, inner child meditation, finishing with a breath work to an amazing playlist where you just allow every emotion you've been suppressing to move through your body and to have your screams and your tears and the whatever. And you finish going, holy crap, I have an amazing, ability to regulate and a new tool. What's next? Well, I have a 5-hour, it's called the overview experience, where I take you through a bird's eye view of your entire life and tie it all together and help develop and deepen the relationship with the inner child that you met in the breathwork session. Often some people met for the first time. Some have been doing inner child work for years, and they've experienced my event and said, wow, I never had a deeper experience than this, because I put music into it, I put entertainment into it, I put my own flavor and creativity into it, and I have a background in musical theater, and I rap and I perform. So I really create an experience for you, all with the purpose of reconnecting you to your body and the younger parts of you that you fragmented, and you learn tools in reconnecting with those parts when they get triggered. And when people want more and they want my guidance, what they do is they fill out an application, and then we kind of suss them out and see if mentally, emotionally, they're ready. They're ready to be there because they're signing up to have all of their wounds triggered. So we can look at them and then move through them and integrate them so that 3 months later, 6 months later, they're able to have healthy relationships. They're able to know, should I stay or should I go? They're able to see their codependent, people pleasing patterns, and they're able to set boundaries. So you learn all of the things that you have let fall by the wayside because you don't really know how to first consider and love yourself. So it's a crash course, not a crash course. It's a deep spiritual, emotional, and neurological journey into self-love, which is the ultimate root cause of the root cause of the root cause upstream, is to start to see yourself through God's eyes. And you actually do that with the program.
This is super incredible. Where can people connect with you? Social media, Facebook, your websites. We're going to put it all in the notes, but if you can just have at it and let people know where they can get access to this information, and that would be great.
Yeah. Well, what I would recommend you do is right now, go to Facebook and add yourself to my Facebook group. It's called Trigger Proof. I do trainings regularly. People ask questions, and then I'll do what I call trigger proof transmissions, where nothing I do is rehearsed. It all just comes right from here. You ask a question, and then I call it a transmission. I just download whatever comes through me based on everything, my experiences, my clients' experiences, my nervous system training, my chiropractic degree, like everything that I've integrated literally just comes through me. I channel when I do it. And then just go ahead and go to drnima.com, and that will kind of guide the way. It has all the information there, just right on my website, drnima.com. And
Dr. Nima,
and at Dr. Nima on Instagram, if you want to keep up with, updates on my little kid as he's growing up, as Dominic grows. I love to post little photos and stories about him.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Nima Rahmany. This has probably been just an absolute, just a real gift and a joy that you have came in, taken the time to share this with you. I'm excited, not only for myself, but also for our listeners, because this is really, really deep work. And a lot of the people that listen to our show might have said, yeah, I've done the seminars, I've done the books, I've read the things, I've seen the psychologists, I've got the sports nutritionists, I got the biohacking gear, I know my blood chemistry, I know my patterns, I know this, but what you're talking about here is just really going beyond and becoming a fully integrated person on all levels, and getting rid of that, maybe that niggling part of your life that you go, when you're sitting with your friends at your coffee shop and you're saying, everything in my life is great, but
my relationships are crap.
Exactly. So check out the links here in Facebook. We're going to have to get you back. I'm sure we're going to get some testimonials from this. I'm going to check this out myself, because I know there's some areas in my life that I could always look at improving and upgrading. And you've been a wealth of information, and this has been so engaging. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Awesome Health Podcast.
Dude, thank you. Thank you for having me. The links are all there. I just put them in the chat there. And so feel free, and I'd love to see you there.
And for all our listeners, I want to thank you for joining us on another Awesome Health Podcast. All the show notes and links will be in the show notes at bioptimizers.com. Awesome Health Podcast. I'm YT Lightheart. Have yourself an awesome day. Take care.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.